Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for coming along to another one of our Fireside Talks. Tonight's speaker is Gráinne Milne McClune, a PhD candidate at the University of Ulster, working on a Northern Bridge collaborative project between Ulster University and Causeway Coast and Glens Borough Council, titled Mapping and Cultural Geography of Sam Henry's Irish Song Archive. Gráinne's PhD explores how the lyrics in Sam Henry's Irish folk songs construct a sense of place and community, and how this can be mapped on the topography of the north of Ireland. This evening's talk explores how folk song lyrics may construct, challenge, or expand cultural identity across Northern Ireland, and looks at the connection between local place and song and culture, particularly across the songs of the Causeway, Coast, and Glens. So, Gráinne, over to you.
That's great. And thank you for that introduction there. I'll just get everything up and make sure the screen is shared. Is that it on right now?
Yep, that's there now.
Okay, great. Yes, so before I start, let me just apologize for sounding quite blocked up. I'm really run down with the cold, as we all are at this time of the year. So hopefully I'll not start coughing when in the middle of talking, but if I do, that's why. Yes, so thank you again, Nick, for the introduction. I am Gráinne and I'm a PhD researcher at Ulster University. So I'm in the third year now of my PhD and hopefully finishing sometime soon, though I do have a lot more writing to do. And I'm currently working with the Causeway Coast and Glen Museum Service as well to research the Sam Henry collection. And Sam Henry and this collection is based in the Causeway Coast area and is a good representation of how place and language may be reflected in the culture of these areas. And I've come to the project myself through studying music in my undergrad at Newcastle University, where I did my BA and MLit, which largely focused on Irish cultural studies in general, as well as vernacular voice performance. So alongside my PhD, I always like to incorporate some practical elements, which is why the most recent project has been to adapt and record a number of the songs from the Sam Henry archive into an album. And most of these songs are about places in the Causeway Coast, but I'll talk about that a little bit more as we go along. My project, as Nick said, is titled Mapping the Cultural Geography of Sam Henry's Irish Song Archive, and it aims to map and analyse the significance of the sense of place in Sam Henry's collection. These research themes therefore look at the themes that arise from his collection and how the lyrics construct a sense of place and community, and how this can be traced to the topography of the north of Ireland. So what this talk aims to do is give a little bit of background on who Sam Henry was, as well as the Songs of the People collection, and introduce the album. But also give a brief overview of some of Henry's interests and hobbies, so we're able to understand a little bit more about his personality and his mentality behind this huge song collection from our local areas. And then to talk a little bit about my research and the main themes that come up, including language and place, all of which, it is hoped, will begin to provide an insight into why the Sam Henry collection and folk song collections more generally are so important to maintain when exploring elements of place and language within any local region or area. So who was Sam Henry? Sam Henry was from Florian and worked as a pension officer for the newly formed Northern Irish government from 1921 onwards, and was also a journalist for the Northern Constitution newspaper. He was a prominent member of the church and community, involved in various clubs and activities in the local area, and many of these were music related. I found from working with the archive that his strong love and passion for music comes through not just in the song collection. The archive also contains his diaries dating back to the early 1900s. And in a diary entry from 1907, he writes of attending musical events, including orchestra concerts and poetry events, and then describes conversations he had about these activities with other people. He was a musician himself, playing the tin whistle and violin. So he combined his professional work with his interest in folklore and music and the local area. In his work as a pension officer, he often took his fiddle or tin whistle with him when visiting the elderly people to assess them for a pension. And then he would play a few tunes and ask if anyone knew the old songs. A lot of the time they did, and perhaps contributed their own lyrics to the tunes that came from their own family or that specific community. And because of this, there are so many songs in the collection with really unknown lyrics, but put to popular airs, to tunes that we probably recognize today. Sam Henry's daughter referred to his tin whistle as a gadget, saying he used it to find common ground with the people he was visiting, and as such managed to preserve many songs that otherwise might have been lost. In his work as a journalist for the Northern Constitution, this is where he ran the weekly newspaper column titled The Songs of the People, in which he gathered and published the folk songs known, played, and sung by people across the north of Ireland between 1923 and 1939. Therefore, this series ran for the first 20 years of Northern Ireland following its establishment in it ran for the first 20 years of Northern Ireland following its establishment. And so it captures and reflects important aspects of Irish culture at a crucial time of political and demographical change. The first song of this series, The Flower of Sweet Dunmill, was published on the 17th of November, 1923. Alongside it was Henry's advertisement for song contributions. He said, "Let it be our joyful task to search out, conserve, and make known the treasures of the songs of the people. The editor will welcome any songs of the people and will rescue from oblivion the treasures that once made the glowing fireside of our native land reflect the brightness in the hearts of the people." There are over 800 songs in the collection, and the manuscripts from the archive contain songs mainly written in solfa notation, a form of music notation which isn't used as much today. But despite this being the largest gathering of folk song ever to be published in these isles, it's still not too well known, recognised, or researched, with little work written about Sam Henry and his song collection. The most significant publication is Sam Henry's Songs of the People book, edited and annotated by Gail Huntington and revised by Lanny Herman, with a geographical index provided by John Molden. Using the complete sets of newspaper columns prepared by Henry, which he presented to archives in Belfast, Dublin, and Washington in the 1940s. Huntington and Herman collated and edited the Songs of the People into 25 thematic groups while assigning them each a Henry or H number. John Molden has also worked with the collection and published a few publications, including the Trim Littleborough, Songs of the Coleraine Area and the Causeway Coast, and Songs of the People, selection from the Sam Henry collection. However, due to the little amount of publication on Sam Henry, this is where I hope my research can come in a bit. So in my research, I'm mainly looking at the lyrics and the themes of the song and what they might be able to tell us about the local places and communities in which so many of the songs are based, or that they tell a story about. This then relates to broader issues surrounding identity and culture in Northern Ireland, which has been at the centre of my work since I was an undergraduate student. Firstly then is place, and how this is conceptualised throughout the collection. And what I really mean by that, and what I'm interested in, is how the songs reveal bonds between people and places. And this isn't always about specific locations, but particular features of the landscapes or towns as well. Likewise, how songs can also be used to create or evoke feelings of belonging and attachment to places. And what I love about exploring this in the Sam Henry songs is that they're all so local to where I grew up in Portstewart. And maybe looking at the songs and the words, I don't always feel the same about how they're described. But that's all part of it, looking at how they may be received and interpreted today, or how much has changed over the last 100 years, and 100 years since the establishment of Northern Ireland. The second theme, which feeds into this, is exploring the connection to nature in the words and lyrics. The strong use of nature imagery and ecological metaphors are used through the songs. These are often referencing rivers, mountains, trees, and seas. Exploring this through the collection then feeds into the sense of place constructed through the songs as we think about our place within nature. And the third area is then language and the use of language throughout the collection. Many of his songs were written in Ulster Scots, and as well as this, there are songs in Irish, which he usually wrote out phonetically as a non-Irish speaker. And all of this together in the collection reflects the complex and diverse song tradition that we have here from Scotland, England, and the rest of Ireland as well, the thistle, rose, and the shamrock. And ultimately, this is a key reason why the Sam Henry collection is considered a non-sectarian collection of song, as there are songs across various communities and cultural traditions in Northern Ireland. So as mentioned, I released last summer, summer it was now, yeah, an album called The Songs of Sam Henry. The CDs are available and you can also stream it on Spotify. But my main intent for this was to get the various unknown songs out there, and it also makes a nice complement to my written PhD work. Many of the tunes are very recognizable. However, certain lyrics will never have been heard before. And the majority of these songs are from this album are about the North Coast, about Coleraine and Portrush. And they were chosen to highlight how both the landscape and local stories, or tragedies in the case of this example, how this can be reflected in folk song, revealing unique senses of place for the people and communities. I'll just get a little bit to play here. Excuse me while I switch it over. Come all you jolly seamen who plough the raging main, and give me your attention till I relate the same. I'm sighing for your heroes who were obliged to die, and in the foaming ocean their bodies fair to lie. I arrived at the town of sweet Portrush, much pleasure they had seen. No more the Floridas where old times they had been. Their sweethearts and the comrades dear, they bid them adieu. 'Twas the raging seas and stormy waves that parted them. It was not for one. So that was a clip from the song The Portrush Fishing Disaster. And it's quite a sad song, as you heard. It tells the story of a shipwreck tragedy that happened in the early 1800s in Portrush, where 4 fishermen sadly lost their lives. These words were written by a carpenter from Portstewart, but Henry noted it down from a man called William Sloane in Coleraine, quite near the start of the series. But this shows how the story was kept alive over 100 years later than the actual tragedy took place. And the song later goes on to name the 4 people who lost their lives. And this meant that this story was likely passed on through generations of their family and the local community, keeping the names known as well. So I wanted to give a little more information on Sam Henry's interests and hobbies, and what he did during his time collecting songs and exploring folklore, before giving a few examples of the kind of areas that my PhD looked at. So as well as printing in the series in the Northern Constitution, Henry shared his collections through radio broadcasts on the likes of the BBC. And his first broadcast was in May 1925, within the first year of broadcasting activity in Ireland. And Henry's last known broadcast seems to have been in 1946. So in almost 20 years, Henry presented radio broadcasts on a lot of different topics. Examples include Ulster's Heritage of Songs, the series which ran in 1935 and 1937, and the Undiscovered Ulster series in 1938, The Adventures of a Song Hunter in 1940, and the programme Old Customs and Legends of Ulster was broadcast to over 20 radio stations in North America in 1937. And during these broadcasts, he often had got singers and musicians and fiddlers to come in and play a bit as well, in a similar way to how I wanted to bring in some music to a written side of things, or a talk. He wanted to bring the songs that he was talking about to life by talking to singers. He also had a strong interest in photography. We can see from a diary entry in 1906 that Henry purchased his first camera and recorded it in his diary. And at the back of this, he had a list of all the first photographs that he took and developed in that year. Over the next 50 years, he photographed the people and places across the region. Many of these featured in local newspapers, in the Derry and Antrim yearbooks, and even in some of the books that he published himself. And also, Sam Henry gave a lot of lectures across Ulster on various subjects concerning folklore, birds and nature, folk songs, and Ulster life more generally. He travelled all over Northern Ireland, from up here at the Causeway Coast down to Newcastle, providing lectures in the likes of churches, town halls, schools, and lecture halls. In many of these lectures, he sang or played the violin and tin whistle to, like I said, bring the folk songs to life. Henry estimated that by 1942, he had lectured around 300 times, giving his last known lecture in 1948. However, a diary entry from 1907 again indicates that he had been lecturing since the early 20th century. He was also a keen writer and published many articles, poems, and several books. This included A Hank of Yarns, The Story of St. Patrick's Coleraine, Dunluce and the Giant's Causeway, Tales of the Antrim Seaboard, and he also edited and illustrated a number of books from North Antrim. So now I have covered a brief overview of Henry's areas of interest, though it would be impossible to include them all in any detail. I'm going to give a little bit more about my research and give some examples, the first being place and home. So a really prominent aspect of much of the Sam Henry collection is how the relationship to home, to Ireland, is expressed throughout. And much of this is seen through the songs of immigration, as it is within folks' collections more generally. And this highlights a sense of people's attachment to their homeland through expressing feelings of separation. Irish migrations to and from North America have been ongoing for centuries, and with that, song transmission is continuous. But one of the most significant migrations, which forms a huge role of the Irish song ballads, is of course the famine of the 1840s. Its effects drastically impacted upon Ireland's political and cultural circumstances and entered folk memory for both the Irish born and the Irish diaspora. And this has been mirrored in the famine experiences of Irish traditional music since. Songs of immigration often entwine a sense of loss with hope and resilience, which resonates with Irish people and those with ancestral links to Ireland all over the world, whose ancestors experienced the loss of their land, their homeland. This mirroring of sadness and hope can be seen in a vast number of songs of this nature in Henry's collection, such as The Green Fields of America. The narrative of this song shifts between the sadness of leaving Ireland and the hope for new beginnings in a new country, ending with a sentiment of hope which wishes for the future Irish overseas to still hold a connection. As you can see, the lyrics are on screen now, if you want to give them a read through. However, furthering this in the Sam Henry collection is the focus on the very local, as he recorded and collected variants of many immigration songs in particular localities around the Corrian area. For example, the Green Hills of Antrim, which embodies much of the same themes of the Green Fields of America, but through a specific local context. It references the leaving behind of Sweet Cushendall and the townland of Cushleek in County Antrim. This is also one of the songs that I've recorded, so I'll play a bit for you to listen, and you'll definitely recognize the tune to this, but perhaps not the lyrics.
Oh, dark was the day when I sailed from Cushleek across the wide ocean, my fortune to see. My heart's with the hills over my native land, and streams that go wandering down to the strand. The place where I'm living, the mountains are high, and lift their big heads far above to the sky. But they'll never compare with the old days to me, where the green hills of Antrim sweep down to the sea. The birds that I see here have plumage that's gay, and the fields are all bright with the blossoms of May. But a lark from the dearer than all, or the gorse that grows wild above Sweet Cushendall. The girls of this country are bonny and bright, the ways that they dress are a wonderful sight. But oh, for a glimpse of my Molly McCree, where the green hills of Antrim sweep down to the sea.
So much of Henry's collection follows this sort of composition, songs incorporating wider folk themes into local settings, which suggests that Henry was capturing an accurate depiction of people's senses of place. The next theme that I talked about is nature, and the sort of nature imagery and objects that are used in his songs, often through the use of metaphors. Rivers are a prominent theme throughout the songs of the People collection, and in folk song and poetry, rivers can symbolize a variety of concepts and feelings. Its flowing properties may represent a progression or journey, as the river imagery takes the subject from a different place than the beginning of the text. As such, the use of the river metaphor can demonstrate changes over time in various contexts. In the Sam Henry collection, the connection to the natural environment in songs is extensive. Numerous songs directly reference this sort of nature object of a specific place. For example, the hills of Ballybully, of Donegal, or the hills of Tyrone, the braes of Sweet Kilhoyle are all examples of songs addressing specific hills or mountains of an area. Doing this helps to create a so-called unique spot, enhancing the personal connection between people and that area. The lyrics of the song Henry number 784, Steve Gallen Bray, is powerful in creating a unique spot through the nature and landscape of that area. Slieve Gallen Bray is part of the Sperrin Mountains in counties Derry and Tyrone. And the lyrics are on the screen here again. These lyrics represent the mountain as a peaceful place away from the city's smoky slums, where one can unwind and breathe God's pure air. It makes various references to the nature in the surroundings, the birds singing, the flowers growing, the sun-kissed leaves on trees, and the cottages and homes, or the cottages and farms. And all of this associates positive feelings of calm and scenic beauty to that specific place. Trees and flowering in folk song and poetry may symbolize stable and secure environments, as trees are foundational elements within any ecosystem, creating habitat for food and other species. Thus, using a stabilizing metaphor in a very specific local context may provide what the cultural geographer Doreen Massey considers a sense of security associated to that area. And again, doing this may help to construct this unique sense of place for the people of that area, as their humble surroundings are representations of the lifestyle and culture. Henry's methods of collecting and his editorial processes also portray his connection to nature, as it is clear he had continuous engagement with the everyday life around him, the people, the communities, and the land. He contacted other known song collectors, performers, and songwriters, and by interacting with the people of Townlands, he was able to ask for the name of such people from particular areas. This was the case for Henry's engagement with the song collector Hugh Cassidy in Mahara, as he writes of their meeting in an article in the Belfast Telegraph in April 1944. Apologies. Henry recorded from Cassidy the song Sweet Fallalay, a song which, like many of the collection, admires the nature and beauty of the scenery with the praise of the people of that area. And the words were written by Hugh Cassidy himself. In a letter to Cassidy, Henry writes that he enjoyed his visit to Fallalay and was delighted to tell him that the song would be published in the Northern Constitution. Sorry for that. In this sense, the authenticity of Henry's methods of collection is somewhat worth acknowledging. It's clear he valued interacting with the people and the communities that the songs were about, as well as experiencing this landscape for himself. However, when he felt it needed to be done, he was not averse to some editorial interventions with the collected material. And Sweet Falalay is a perfect example of this sort of minor editing to achieve his overall theme. And this song featured as part of the latest UTV series, Mahon's Way, where presenter Joe Mahon was exploring Sam Henry. And we did a short interview in that area. I'm going to play a clip from it now as it sums up what I'm talking about. Also gets me to stop talking for a minute. And it also talks about the language, which will move into the next part quite nicely.
Communicators, and he used such. Seamus Heaney was one of the world's great communicators, and he used such vocabulary, Mara and I agree, not to make his poetry more obscure, but because these words were an important part of his lived experience, and he longed to preserve their usage and their meaning. And he wasn't a lone voice in trying to do so. Although most of them plied their trade in relative obscurity, there were plenty of other poets where he came from. The fact that they were known at all outside of their own townlands is partly due to the efforts of a Coleraine man who made it his life's mission to preserve their works for posterity. His name was Sam Henry.
As I went a-walking one morning of late, where Flora's gay mantle the hills decorate, the blackbird and linnet were singing so gay among the green bushes in Sweet Falalay.
That song that you hear is called Sweet Falalay, and the sweet singing voice you hear belongs to the person walking beside me as we climb the slopes of the very same Falalay, a townland adjacent to the Glenshane Pass in the Sperrins. She is Grania Milner McClune, a PhD music student at Ulster University, and Sweet Falalay is just one of a vast number of songs collected by Sam Henry.
There are no empty pockets in Sweet Falalay. The Sam Henry collection itself, it contains over 800 songs, 15,000 artifacts that include letters from the people who sent in songs. But he worked as a pensions officer and a journalist for the Northern Constitution newspaper. And he started his Songs of the People series in 1923, and it ran from then till 1939. And he advertised that he wanted people to send in songs from their local areas or write new words to songs about the areas or poems. And he published those songs over those 20 years.
Here I have to declare a personal interest in Grania's academic study, because I'm showing her a photograph of my wife's grandfather. Hugh Cassidy is the man who wrote Sweet Falalay about the townland in which he lived. He was born here in 1867, and is pictured here with his granddaughter Margaret a few years before his death in 1947. But you have that song now, Sweet Falalay, as part of your collection.
And I actually did a little bit more research into it, looking through the archive, and I found another letter between Hugh Cassidy and Sam Henry.
Right.
And interestingly, he says he's really excited to post this. He's spoken to the editor of the Northern Constitution, and they're excited to get that posted, but that they were going to leave out a couple of verses. There was a verse about lorries, and Sam Henry wrote that he felt that didn't match the theme, but that the words were beautiful about the landscape.
So he was typical of the kind of people who would...
So in that, you can see that as much as he wanted to stay authentic to the people that he was getting the songs from, he did still do a little bit of editing to create his overall sort of that romantic theme of nature. And this dominant theme throughout his songs of creating an idyllic natural spaces is very much a reflection of the British Romantic movement, which the popularity of folk song in the 19th and 20th century bears witness to. These songs may also form a role of lyrical ballads in a Wordsworthian romantic sense, which had a sort of shift in thinking from the emphasis on like logic and reason to what Wordsworth described as emotion, recollected in tranquility. And this way of thinking remained and is depicted through the songs of Sam Henry as the rural landscape is valued over aspects of urban living. And while this demonstrates Henry's influence over individual songs, it also suggests his overall intent to reflect themes which would fit into romantic folk song culture. And so the culture of these lands at a particular point in time are kept alive and passed on through song to the generations which follow. And the final theme then is the use of language, and a really vast majority of the songs are display elements of Ulster Scots. And Ulster Scots, in terms of the language, refers to this sort of lesser known language of Scots spoken in areas of Ulster. And while I'm not an expert at all in Ulster Scots, I can recognise many of the songs in the collection reveal elements with this sort of influence. There are a few examples of this, including the song Mary 18, which Sam Henry collected from John Henry Macaulay of Ballycastle, and he contributed about 21 songs to the series. And as you can see in this song, there are words such as hey for have, ken for no, and either spelled I-T-H-E-R for either. And these are all examples of sort of Ulster Scots influence. Henry also collected songs from Mrs. Brownlow from Ballylagan in Cloyfin in Coleraine using Ulster Scots. Songs such as My Dog's Dead has words like day for do, gie for give, tay for two, lugs for ears. And there are numerous more examples of this, which I'll leave on screen for a minute, but not focus too much because I'm just seeing the time. But yeah, a lot of Ulster Scots does come through in this. And as well as these lesser known songs, Henry also has parts of more well-known songs such as Robbie Burns songs like My Love Is Like a Red Red Rose and A Fond Kiss. There are elements of or verses from that incorporated into other songs in the collection as well. But there is also evidence of the use of Irish or Gaelic language in the songs. And a number of the songs are written in what appears to be Irish. However, as a non-Irish speaker, like myself, Henry wrote these as heard and not as they actually would have been written. Not going to embarrass myself by trying to pronounce some of these, but again, there are some examples on the screen. And these songs up here were collected from Frank Craig in Rathlin Island. And Gaelic has been on Rathlin Island from the earliest of times. And there are many, many Gaelic songs from Rathlin in Henry's collection. In fact, most of the songs with the Irish influence have come from Rathlin. Katie Glass was an Irish singer who contributed a lot of them. However, as John Molden has stated, many of these songs were closer in language to Scots than they were to the Irish of Ireland. Therefore, this actually portrays how closely related and blended the languages are. So to end, finally, why is this all important and what sort of impact does it have why is that Sam Henry collection important to be looking at? And I mean, there could be many, many more PhDs or projects beyond what I'm looking at. But to me, it is important today for two key reasons. At a time when the notion of contested identity in Northern Ireland is a constant and re-evaluating issue, particularly post-Brexit, and concerns of cultural conflicts are on the rise, it is important to highlight the sort of cross-cultural fluidity of traditions throughout the region. There is much richness to the dialect and language across these areas, the Cosy Coast and Glens, as well as Northern Ireland more generally. And the lyrics of the Songs of the People series so powerfully illustrate this. Additionally, the closeness between multiple elements of these languages essentially demonstrates how closely related the traditions throughout the areas are. And in a similar way to how that final episode of Derry Girls that everyone was crying at, how it highlighted the importance of the Good Friday Agreement and why we must remember its impact today, the Sam Henry folk songs remind us how culture and traditions in Northern Ireland are so clearly blended, not divided. And finally, as we face the biggest climate crisis of our time, the embodiment of nature and use of symbolism through the Sam Henry songs can encourage the evaluation of our place within natural surroundings. It enables the thinking of the impact we have on the environment directly around us when we're reading and looking at about the beauty of our local areas, with a particular emphasis throughout these songs on the specific places of the Northern Irish landscape. This notion can be furthered and too forms part of the discussions surrounding the sense of place in the archive. The hills, the rivers, and the mountains are all part of the musical culture, and nature becomes culture when people interact with it. So to conclude, it is clear that Sam Henry was committed to exploring, capturing, and preserving cultural traditions and stories of our local areas. He was a man of the community who had a real way of connecting with people, the public, and this comes through in his life's work. It's great to see that Sam Henry is being recognised more and more now through various community engagements with the museum, or there's the local trad group, North Coast Trad, that runs a Sam Henry summer school. And also this talk featured as Belfast Trad Fest last summer. And the songs have featured on both the Irish language radio station, Radio Fulcha, and the Ulster Scots Kintra programme. So my research really just touches the surface of something which has the power to be so impactful. And Sam Henry never got to live to see his life work published in books or in music as he so desired when he actively sought out a publication, and no one took it up at that time. But I hope to see this happening more and more now in his memory. Thank you very much.